Hi everyone, I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here today with a friend of mine, Dr. Salvatore Stolfo, who is the founder and CTO, Chief Technical Officer, of a very cool company called Allure Security. And Dr. Stolfo is also affiliated with Columbia University, so we're going to learn a lot about some cybersecurity points. And Sal, thanks for making some time today.
Oh, my great pleasure.
That's great. And I think we chatted before. You're in Woodstock today. You and I are both kind of away from our normal desks, doing pandemic duty, huh?
Yeah, it's COVID, and we're up in the woods and worry more about ticks and deer than we do about COVID.
Well, listen, before we get into a little bit of about you and about your journey in the tech, just real briefly, give us a quick elevator pitch on Allure Security. Love to hear what you guys are doing.
Yeah, Allure is interesting. It's a company that I spun out of my lab at Columbia. I stood up a security research lab that was sponsored by DARPA and a number of other agencies in the mid 90s. So I've been at this for quite a few years. And a number of the projects that we were doing, the government was asking for kinds of research that you just don't want to do in an open university environment. So I spun the company out so that we could work on very hard problems, nation state level security issues. And we were in an R&D, government funded R&D mode for quite a few years. And then a few years ago, under encouragement from the government, we decided to go commercial. And the past few years, Allure has now been focused on the phishing problem, which is amongst the hardest problems to solve.
Yeah.
Anything that's oriented towards trying to solve the human in the loop security problem is a hard problem. And that's what we're focused on these days.
Well, good. We're going to get to that. I'm going to be very interested to hear about your technology. But why don't we start? Tell us a little about yourself. How did you get interested in computer science and in cybersecurity, and come to both academia and also doing a startup? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been at Columbia for 40 plus years, so I'll give you the short abridged version of that answer. I've been involved with computing since the mid 70s. And those are the days of the massive mainframes taking up whole buildings in some cases. But I was at Quran Institute getting my PhD in what I thought was going to be mathematical logic. But then I got hooked on machine learning for that period of time. That was much more fascinating to me. In any case, at Quran at NYU, I just took the IRT Uptown and became a professor at Columbia by happenstance. I just didn't even think about a career choice. It was just kind of a natural thing to do then. And I've been at Columbia for all these many years. But when I first started working at Columbia, I was focused on building parallel hardware for large data science oriented computations, because the machines then were very, very slow for the kinds of problems that I wanted to solve. But when being a professor in those days, you had the choice of either eating or having a roof over your head, but not both unless you were a consultant. So I consulted for the CTO of Citibank for a few years and got hooked on the credit card fraud problem. And so I worked with them on applying more modern machine learning at the time on the fraud problem. And studying fraud was a real eye-opener for me. It was just amazing how clever people were being able to steal money and steal credit cards. And after working on that for a few years, that's when I wrote a big proposal to DARPA to open a lab focused on using AI methods for computer security. And so the IDS lab has been established since 1995. We've been working on a number of different technologies for solving computer security problems. 95 patents later, hundreds of papers, 30 students. So it's been a great ride. In security in general, you know what ComSec is, with IT security is ITsec. There's JobSec. There's never a shortage of problems to work on. And phishing now has become a primary focus simply because it's growing and it's becoming the major attack vector that the bad guys are using to break into corporate networks and to steal easily. The one thing to realize that is the value that we once imagined was, gold in a vault, or the furnishings or physical things that we own. The value now that we all have is on the internet. And it's obviously that's where the action is, and that's where the thieves and fraudsters have focused on stealing assets on the internet. And the primary way of doing it is to get the keys, get access to that value. And those keys are credentials. And how can you get those credentials? You can try to break into an environment and steal the credentials. But it's much more effective if you just send an email to someone and trick them into telling you the credential. That's phishing. A big problem.
Be great to maybe have a little peek into the secret sauce of what you guys do at Allure. Like, what's the essence of your approach? How are you dealing with this problem? And that kind of has it weave the technology and service together into a solution.
Yeah, so phishing and anti-phishing, there are a number of different products and companies that have been focused on that, but primarily focused on the corporate phishing problem, spear phishing, for example, trying to trick employees of a large enterprise to give up their credentials and then therefore access to the corporate network. And those technologies are very broadly deployed. There are a number of shortcomings to that. One is that they depend upon detecting phishing sites using domain name monitoring and under the guise of brand protection, or that's what those companies typically call their products. And the other is to try to train the employees not to be tricked. And training people is just not very effective. But be that as it may, there's a huge population that's uncovered by these technologies, and that's you and me and our loved ones and our friends and our family. It's the users, the customers of the enterprise. Their email flow can't be inspected by the corporate network that then applies all these various anti-phishing technologies. They don't look at all of your web traffic. You're essentially on your own on the internet. And so when you access the services of some company that you are a customer of, you're on your own. And the key to what we focus on is to protect the customer base. That's where all the action is in phishing. Now, how do we do that? Well, how do we reach those customers? Our customer is the enterprise with the large customer base. And what we do is work with them to make small modifications to their web pages. And whenever their web pages are cloned or copied by the phishers, that then is the subject of a subsequent email phishing campaign, we will know that that cloned web page is sitting on an illegitimate server. And so we detect the cloned pages very quickly and very rapidly, and that is huge. That's important. Fast detection of the cloned web page means we could mitigate the problem, do something, take action, and prevent victims from visiting that site. How we do that is, one is normal takedown. Takedown is standard, but not effective. It may take too long. Phishing sites, recent studies have shown the phishers only need 10, 12 hours, and they gather enough victims to make it economically viable for them. So you have to act quickly. And if your takedown process takes days, it's rather valueless. So what we do is mitigate the problem by changing the economics for the phisher. And how we do that is that when we detect that phishing site, we then visit it and stuff it with deceptive material. We lie to it. We lie to the phishers and give them unbounded amounts of bogus, fake credentials. So what they have stolen now, if they do have some ordinary user that were victimized, their data is small, minority compared to all of the other data that they've gathered, and the phisher now has a pile of junk. So we've poisoned the data that they've stolen.
Mhm.
And that changes the economics of phishing. It changes the game entirely now. And if we scale this across many of the customers who have the large user base that we're trying to protect, phishing no longer is a viable economic game for the phisher to bother. And then they will find something else to do, but they won't be phishing.
Sal, I'm sure you get asked this frequently, but I'm curious, what are the sort of the legal sort of considerations in doing something? Like, you hear these crazy stories about somebody like shooting a prowler and getting in trouble for something like that. Like when you go in, obviously there may be terms and conditions on these bogus sites. I assume that they don't stand. Like, is there any sort of rights or something that are or terms or conditions, or is this perfectly reasonable to go in and stuff these sites?
I can't imagine any legal liability. The fisher may get angry. I don't know whether they might file a lawsuit that prevented them from stealing from large numbers of people. I would be happy to respond to that lawsuit.
Well, I have to ask somebody at Columbia Law School to take a look at that one.
The bogus
That's
data is
interesting.
not real data. It's not real people. So there's no real
Right.
identity behind it. One thing I have to say as well, which is when people speak about phishing and in the literature and in patents and in products, it's always referred to as a credential stealing attack. And it is more than that. We've been studying phishing sites from the past 5 years, about 150,000 or so sites, not the URLs alone. There's plenty of analyses of how the URLs trick people. It's the actual phishing sites, the copies, the clones that the phishers had set up, and we look at the content. And we've analyzed what is it that the phishing site is actually trying to steal from the user, from the customer. And it turns out 2 to 3% of that data set are like coupon-like sites that are just asking for your phone number or your email address, not a password. And that's clearly how they are finding email addresses and mobile numbers for subsequent email phishing campaigns or for vishing campaigns where they'll call you and try to trick you, or smishing campaigns where they'll send text messages with links to their bad sites. 2 to 3% just contact information. 10, 12% are credentials. They're asking for your username and your password to get access to your bank account or access to whatever service, your gaming site and so forth. 85% or a bit more is digital identity theft. When was the last time you visited your bank site and they ask you for your social security number? When you go to the cloned phishing site that stood up a copy of the banking site, they ask you what's your mother's maiden name, what's your driver's license number, what's your redress number on your passport, on your TSA card, what's your social security. They are stealing identities. And so phishing is much more dangerous. It's not just a small problem that your customers are going to give access to your service or to their own bank accounts. Customers' identities are being stolen by phishing sites. It's a very big problem.
It's a cool approach. I'm curious, what's been the response? I've seen that you guys have had some commercial success. What's been your experience working with customers now?
So bar none, the customers are ecstatic, elated that we detect the sites even before they are actively being used. And in several of the cases, which is really very interesting, we get a signal whenever the clone site is visited by someone. So the very first visitor is detected by our technology. And that is typically the phisher testing the site that they just stood up. And so our customers are elated because, oh my gosh, none of my customers are going to get victimized by this, and we stop it very, very quickly. So that's a huge benefit.
What is the trick that you're using to pick that up? I know there's probably something proprietary there, but what's the essence of how you detect that?
So think of it as we embed in our customer's web page information, a little bit of magic, so that when it is copied by the phisher and set up on an illegitimate server, and whenever that copy page is served to some browser, we get a signal. And so we identify the servers that are hosting that page and then determine from our customers if it's a legitimate server or not. And that's immediate. It's a network signal.
Are there some DNS tricks or things like that that you're using to redirect and identify what's happening?
We don't have to do redirect. We get a direct signal, and then we get the location of the server and the particular pages that are being served, and then we go into action.
And that's made possible because you have a relationship directly with the customer. They're setting this up with you.
Exactly. They employ Allures technology, embed it on their web pages, and then their web pages, if they're copied, we will know.
That's cool. Hey, which sectors have you been working with? Are there some banking I would think would like this? Are there any that have been more popular than others?
Banking is the finance vertical is the most obvious, obviously.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yes. And I like the finance industry. Not only did I start my work in machine learning applied to security with the banking industry, that's where the value is, and they have quite a bit of sophistication in their own internal systems. That there are other things that we can do together, which I'll explain in just a moment. But certainly in pharma, and in buying medicines online is another big obvious vertical, and education, especially now with COVID and so many folks remote teaching and moving employees to home.
Right.
In the education
Hey, have you
sector.
convinced Columbia to use this? We've got to get between you and I. We got a lot of pull at NYU and Columbia. They should be your customer, right?
Yes.
Good. Good. Is it Maida's their CISO? She's got a good
Yes.
head on her shoulders. That's good. How about NYU? Are they customers?
Not yet.
All right, then after we're done, let's get a hold of them and get them signed up for this.
Yeah, the problem is every time I contact NYU, they're asking me for an alumni donation before they'll speak.
Well, you send them $10. I'm a alumni of Columbia Business School, so we've sure got the wagon circled here. Hey, question about the future. So where's this all going? Like I would imagine that at some point we're all going to hope that we don't have to do these kinds of stuffing and things. Where's this all headed, like in the next few years?
So first of all, also the core technology of the company is evaluation of websites and using very fast detectors to analyze a site to determine whether it's a phishing site or not. So downstream, I can see deploying our technology to the browser, the endpoint browser, so that each time a user goes to a website, we would, in the background, transparently check that site. And if we see the site is dangerous being, for example, this site is going to try to steal your digital identity, a banner to warn you that you're visiting a known malicious site. So downstream, that would be a definite path that the company will follow. Until then, this notion of stuffing decoy data is changing the economics, but it's more important than that. If you do it cleverly and do it right, you start getting the ability to get enhanced attribution. Who the heck are the phishers? We could start phishing for the phishers. And by doing this, it's really simply a matter of working with the right customer who, for example, if we stuff a phishing site with a bogus identity, but link that decoy to an internal decoy account. So let's think about banking for a moment. If we stuff a cloned banking site with a decoy credential, that decoy credential works at the original real banking site, but it's linked to a decoy account. Then, if the phisher accesses the account, why would they access the account? To transfer money. In which case, follow the money. And now you would identify the target mule accounts that they're trying to transfer into. And that's a way now to have a trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the fisher. Because after all, why are they doing this? To steal money. And so just follow the flow of the money. The banking system can do that. But now we are tying essentially the internet attack threat with the internal fraud systems of a bank. You now get the opportunity to identify the fishers. And I think that's very, very powerful, very important. So that will create a deterrent. Not only we're changing the economics, but now they run a real risk, because right now they have absolutely no risk and no cost in conducting that fishing game. That's what I think the future holds for the Allure technology.
Well, right. That's an interesting view and an optimistic one. So, hey, listen. First of all, I want to congratulate you on the company. This is very cool. Love to see the interplay between academia and a startup. It's nice, particularly nice to see it in New York City. I've certainly encouraged people to give you a call. I think your website would be a good place for them to start. And just again, on behalf of everybody watching, Sal, thanks so much for everything you do in our industry. I know your students benefit from being in the classroom with you, and I'm sure the folks in your company love working with you. So again, thanks for spending some time with us today.
Very sweet of you, Ed. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Good. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.